Deuteronomy Chapter Summaries, 1-34. Published by BibleVise. Standing as the final book of the Law of Moses, Deuteronomy holds immense significance in the Judeo-Christian tradition. These Deuteronomy chapter summaries offer a concise overview of the book's contents, guiding you through its themes, instructions, and historical context. When you are done reading here, you may also want to check out our complete list of Bible chapter summaries for every book of the Bible. Book of Deuteronomy Summary by Chapter. Chapter 1. Reviewing the Journey. Moses opens Deuteronomy by recounting the Israelites' journey from Mount Sinai to the plains of Moab, highlighting some of their rebellions and victories. He emphasizes the importance of remembering their history so that the people will obey God's laws as they enter the Promised Land. Chapter 2. Conquering Kings. Moses reminds the people of how they passed through the lands of Esau's descendants and the Moabites after God commanded them not to engage in conflict. He then tells of their victories over King Sihon of the Amorites and King Og of Bashan, and how they took possession of their lands. Chapter 3. Allocating Land. Moses continues his speech by recounting how the lands of Og and Sihon were divided among the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. He reminds the people that he was not allowed to cross over the Jordan River and encourages them to fully possess the land that God has given them. Chapter 4. A Call to Obedience. Moses urges the Israelites to obey God's laws faithfully and not to add to or subtract from them. He warns against the dangers of idolatry and emphasizes the greatness and uniqueness of God, a stark contrast to the false gods of other nations. Chapter 5. The Ten Commandments Revisited. Moses restates the Ten Commandments, the foundational covenant given by God at Mount Sinai. He reminds the people of the awesome circumstances in which the commandments were given and stresses the importance of impressing these laws upon their children. Chapter 6. The Greatest Commandment. Moses expands upon the first commandment with what is commonly known as the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. He stresses the importance of teaching these truths diligently to their children and binding the commandments upon themselves as reminders. Chapter 7. Conquer and Destroy. Moses commands the Israelites to utterly destroy the nations living in the Promised Land and to avoid making covenants or intermarrying with them. He explains that these nations are a snare that could lead the Israelites away from their true God. Chapter 8. Remember God's Provision. Moses encourages the people to remember how God humbled them and provided for them during their 40 years in the wilderness. He warns that they must not become arrogant or forget the Lord when they enter the prosperous land, attributing their success to their own strength. Chapter 9. Reminders of God's Power. Moses recounts specific events from the Israelites' journey to highlight God's power and faithfulness and their own lack of faith at times. He reminds them of how God delivered them from Egypt through signs and wonders, and how they rebelled against him despite witnessing his power. Chapter 10. The Second Set of Tablets. Moses narrates how he ascended Mount Sinai again to receive a second set of stone tablets after the first ones were broken because of the golden calf incident. He explains how he remained on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights, receiving instructions from God for the people. Chapter 11. Covenant Renewal and Warnings. Moses recounts God's instructions regarding renewing the covenant at Mount Horeb. He warns the people against worshiping other gods, reminding them of the consequences faced by those who disobeyed in the past. He emphasizes the importance of loving and serving God with all their hearts and minds. Chapter 12. Centralizing Worship. Moses instructs the Israelites that they must only worship God at the place he chooses, not at the many high places used by the surrounding nations for their idolatrous worship. He emphasizes the importance of offering sacrifices and celebrating festivals only at the designated place, fostering unity and preventing the spread of idolatry. Chapter 13. False Prophets and Idolatry. Moses warns the Israelites about the dangers of false prophets and teachers who may try to lead them astray from worshiping the one true God. He instructs them to test such individuals by their teachings and their results, and to reject those who lead them towards idolatry. Chapter 14. Mourning and the promise of a new generation. Moses reminds the people of how their lack of faith resulted in them being denied entry into the promised land for 40 years, with only their children allowed to enter. He tells them to mourn the death of those who will not reach the land and reaffirms God's covenant promise to bring a new generation into the land. Chapter 15. Dietary laws and tithes. Moses outlines specific dietary laws regarding clean and unclean animals, reminding the people that these regulations are a way to set them apart and a reminder of their dependence on God for their sustenance. He also establishes regulations for offerings and tithes, ensuring that the needs of the Levites and the poor are met. Chapter 16. Laws for priests, Levites, and kings. Moses outlines guidelines for the conduct of priests and Levites, emphasizing their roles and responsibilities in leading the people in worship. He also establishes regulations for the future king of Israel, ensuring that he does not accumulate excessive wealth or engage in practices that would lead the people away from God. Chapter 17. Laws for judges and officials. Moses lays out regulations for judges and officials, emphasizing the importance of fairness, justice, and impartiality in their rulings. He warns against bribery and corruption and encourages the people to seek out wise and discerning leaders. Chapter 18. Cities of refuge and the avenger of blood. Moses establishes the concept of cities of refuge, offering protection for unintentional killers who seek sanctuary from the avenger of blood, someone with the right to exact revenge. He also outlines the process for resolving cases involving unintentional killings. Chapter 19. Maintaining purity and removing doubt. Moses provides instructions for dealing with situations that may cause ceremonial uncleanliness, such as contact with death. He also addresses the issue of a doubtful case, where guilt or innocence in a crime is unclear, outlining the process for seeking God's guidance in such situations. Chapter 20. Replacing leaders and military commands. Moses recounts how Aaron, the high priest, dies on Mount Hor and is succeeded by his son, Eleazar. He also outlines various military regulations, including instructions on capturing cities, treating prisoners of war, and dividing spoils of war. Chapter 21. Victories over Kings Sihon and Og. Moses retells the story of the Israelites' victories over Kings Sihon and Og of the Amorites. He emphasizes God's role in granting them victory and warns them against adopting the practices of the conquered nations. Chapter 22. Warnings against idolatry and immorality. Moses delivers a strong warning against the allure and dangers of idolatry, urging the people to remain faithful to the one true God and not to follow the practices of the surrounding nations. He also warns against sexual immorality and outlines specific laws aimed at maintaining purity and honoring the sanctity of marriage. Chapter 23. Qualifications for leadership and warfare. Moses establishes specific requirements for individuals seeking leadership positions and participation in warfare. He outlines limitations based on physical characteristics, moral conduct, and past transgressions, emphasizing the importance of maintaining a morally sound and strong military force. Chapter 24. Blessings and curses. Moses delivers a series of blessings and curses, outlining the potential consequences of obedience and disobedience to God's laws. He foretells a future of both prosperity and hardship, depending on the choices made by the Israelites. Chapter 25. Instructions for engaging in war and dividing spoils. Moses provides specific instructions for engaging in war against enemies and outlines guidelines for dividing spoils of war after victory. He emphasizes the importance of treating women and children with respect and prohibits taking certain items as spoils to prevent the spread of idolatry. Chapter 26. Renewing the covenant at Moab. Moses gathers the Israelites and leads them in a public renewal of the covenant with God. He reminds them of their history and emphasizes their commitment to follow God's commandments. Chapter 27. Appointing Joshua as successor. Moses appoints Joshua as his successor and encourages the people to be strong and courageous as they enter the promised land. He reassures them of God's presence and encourages them to remain faithful to the covenant. Chapter 28. The Song of Moses. Moses delivers a final song to the Israelites, reminding them of God's faithfulness and their responsibility to obey his commands. He warns them of the consequences of disobedience and encourages them to choose the path of righteousness. Chapter 30. The final exhortation and choice. Moses reminds the people of their freedom to choose between life and death, obedience and disobedience to God. He urges them to choose life and to love and obey the Lord their God with all their hearts and minds. Chapter 31. Moses' farewell address and song. Moses delivers a final speech to the Israelites, encouraging them to remain faithful to God and warning them against the dangers of idolatry. He also delivers a final song praising God's righteousness and faithfulness. Chapter 32. The Song of Moses. Moses delivers a final song to the Israelites, summarizing the history of their relationship with God and urging them to remain faithful to him. He warns them against the dangers of disobedience and encourages them to trust in God's love and protection. Chapter 33. Moses' blessing and death. Moses blesses each of the 12 tribes of Israel, foretelling their future and their inheritance in the promised land. He then ascends Mount Nebo, views the land from afar, and dies at the age of 120. The chapter concludes by emphasizing the leadership of Joshua as the Israelites prepare to enter the land. Chapter 34. Farewell and Succession. In the final chapter of Deuteronomy, Moses is unable to enter the promised land due to his past disobedience. He ascends Mount Nebo, where God shows him the entire land. Moses dies at the age of 120, and the Israelites mourn him for 30 days. The chapter concludes by emphasizing Joshua's leadership as the Israelites prepare to cross the Jordan River and enter the land God has promised them.